All right, greetings. The Secretary General will be arriving shortly in Abidjan, where he will attend tomorrow the 5th African Union-European Union Summit. Tomorrow he will deliver remarks at the summit, which has the theme Investing in Youth for a Sustainable Future, and we'll try to make those remarks available to you on an embargoed basis. And while there, he will also hold several bilateral meetings before coming back to work and being in the office Thursday afternoon. Our colleagues at the UN mission in Mali report 4 attacks in the KIDAL region today. 3 separate camps in Aguelhok, Tesselit, and KIDAL came under rocket and mortar attack this morning. Search operations in pursuit of the perpetrators are ongoing. The peacekeeping mission also reports that peacekeepers on patrol this morning in Kidal City were fired upon, but thank God no casualties were reported. We obviously condemn these attacks that may constitute war crimes under international law. And the 8th round of intra-Syrian talks started today in Geneva. A delegation of the Syrian opposition is already in Geneva and met in the afternoon with Stephane de Mistura, the special envoy for Syria. Mr. de Mistura also received a message that the delegation of the government of Syria will arrive tomorrow. This morning, the special envoy met with the P5 countries at the Palais des Nations in Geneva. That meeting was initiated by the delegation of France. And today, a UN Syrian Arab Red Crescent interagency convoy entered Nashabia in the besieged eastern Ghouta area to deliver food, health, nutrition items for 7,200 people in need. You'll recall that the convoy attempted to enter yesterday, but had been forced to return due to fighting in the area. And the Secretary General's Special Representative in Iraq, Jan Kubish, spoke out against what he called the cowardly terrorist gun attacks and suicide bombing that took place in Baghdad yesterday evening. He said that despite defeats at the hands of the Iraqi security forces, Daesh remains a potent force and Iraqis need to remain vigilant in the coming period. Mr. Kubish added that the terrorists' acts, added that the terrorists' acts to stoke fear among Iraqis would not succeed. You can read more online. And also in Iraq, our humanitarian colleagues there say that water shortages in Tel Afar, northern Iraq, have been affecting some 20,000 people. 8 partners are seeking solutions, but are impeded by hampered access due to checkpoint closures, which means humanitarian deliveries must be made using longer routes. And at the Security Council today, the Assistant Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Bintou Keita, said the deployment of the Regional Protection Force in South Sudan is making good and tangible progress. However, certain operations of the UN mission in the country continue to be impeded by the national authorities, and the security situation in South Sudan remains precarious. Mr. Keita said she was particularly concerned by the real risk of an escalation in violence with the onset of the dry season and the government's push to assert military dominance across the country. She also requested Security Council to impress on the government to uphold its obligations and cease obstructions and restrictions of movement imposed by both UN uniformed personnel patrols and UN human rights officers. Finally, she underlined the importance of having a unified and unconditional international support to the political process. It will be crucial for the government and all political parties to constructively engage in the peace agreement revitalization process and start immediately by ceasing all hostilities and taking defensive military positions, she concluded. And earlier in the day, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, and the Director General of the UN Migration Agency, Ambassador William Lacey Swing, briefed the Security Council on the situation of migrants and refugees in the Mediterranean. Mr. Grandi said the grave abuses perpetrated against migrants and refugees along the Central American routes can no longer be ignored, and stressed the international community's inability to prevent and resolve these conflicts is at the root of their plight. Without legal pathways to safety, refugees and migrants are exposed to torture, rape, sexual exploitation, slavery, and other forms of forced labor, he said, adding that where governance is weak, transnational criminal networks take root. He also said that the UN refugee and migration agencies are working together to tackle this issue, but noted that there are dramatic funding gaps, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Meanwhile, Ambassador Swing also briefed the Council, and today the IOM reported that this weekend the number of migrants or refugees who have died on the Mediterranean Sea routes has surpassed the 3,000 figure so far this year. This makes the fourth consecutive year that migrants are drowning, have reached this number. And also from IOM, newly released data shows that almost half of all identified child trafficking cases begin with some family member involvement. According to the data released, the extent of family member involvement is up to 4 times higher than in the case of adult trafficking, suggesting the need for more prevention efforts targeting children and their families. The data also shows that children are most likely to be coerced into trafficking through physical, sexual, or psychological abuse, while adults are more likely to be controlled by having their documents confiscated or having someone exploit their irregular status in a foreign country. The IOM said it will use the data to strengthen counter trafficking interventions and also outline a series of measures that governments can take to tackle the issue. More information online. And the chef de cabinet, Marie-Louisa Ribeiro Viotti, speaking today at a special event in Queens, at the Queens Museum, marking the 70th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 181. This is an event organized by the Permanent Mission of Israel. She read out a message on behalf of the Secretary General in which he said that since Israel became a member state of the United Nations in 1949, the UN's cooperation has come to encompass many areas, from peacekeeping to sustainable development to humanitarian challenges and disaster relief around the world. The Secretary General said he is determined to strengthen the relationship. He will continue to speak out against anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, hate speech, and the use of anti-Semitic appeals by violent extremist groups to recruit new followers. He will also continue to do his part to help Israelis and Palestinians take the historic steps to achieve a two-state solution and attain the peace that has proven so elusive for so long. And finally, just want to flag that this coming Sunday at 7 p.m., you can help fight hunger by attending a benefit concert, which will feature a performance by our colleagues at the UN Chamber Music Society. The concert is free, but however, donations are very much welcome. Proceeds will be directed to the Food Bank for New York City. The concert will take place at the All Saints Episcopal Church on 60th Street in Manhattan at 7 p.m. on Sunday. If you want to do something against hunger and enjoy music, pick up the flyer in my office. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stephane. What is the main message that the Secretary General will be delivering to the African Union, European Union Summit in Abidjan?
It'll be a message focused on youth, on the need for economic development, also on the overall need for development in the African Union. Yes, Masood.
Thank you, Stephane. There's this report that Vice President of the United States, Pence, is saying that President Trump is about to move the United States Embassy to Israel, to Jerusalem. What is the position of United Nations on this move to be made by United?
I think we've made our position clear in the past, and I'm not going to speculate on what may happen. Mr. Lee, and then Errol.
Sure. Just one bureaucratic thing and then one more substantive thing. I just wanted to know if you can confirm this.
Bureaucracy is substance at the UN.
Okay, let's see. Can you confirm that Hafiz Saeed, Pakistan, who recently released by Pakistan and on the Al Qaeda sanctions list, has requested to be removed? It's of some controversy in the South Asia, and I was trying to find out if there is an ombudsman or ombudspersons, this is the bureaucratic part, appointed by Antonio Guterres to replace the one who left in August. Is there, and if not, when will there be one?
I will check on the ombudsperson's post. On your first question, that's a question to be asked of the relevant council sanctions committee.
I think they are supposed to file with the ombudsman. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, but I think I'll check.
Okay.
I think for some reason it's a different ombuds.
Okay, I
person.
told you it was
I think the council, and I may be struck down with lightning for being wrong, but I think the council has its own ombudsperson for sanctions listing, separate from the UN ombudsperson.
I'm glad we started this friendly because I want to ask you about China Energy
Yes.
Fund Committee. Yesterday you'd said that you don't see in the indictment anything, you or your team don't see anything sufficiently UN related to trigger an audit such as was held in the previous case.
I don't think I said that, but
oh, well, that's
okay.
how I read.
All right.
Okay. You said no staff members involved. So I have two questions. Number one, CEFC, China Energy Company, is a member of the Global Compact. And I remember in the previous case, Sun Can-ip was immediately removed because of the indictment, even though they weren't named in the indictment.
Right.
So I'm asking, is there a different standard or
No, I don't think
some
it's a
kind
different
of
standard. I mean,
inattention?
I think obviously this happened very recently over the holidays. We'll check with our Global Compact people, but the policies have not changed, and their efforts to ensure that companies that belong to the Global Compact are up to snuff.
Okay, and the other question is, yesterday at the bail hearing for Sheikh Gaudio, it emerged that the person, one of the four people paying bail, his spouse is the resident is a UN official in Equatorial Guinea. Turns out she's the resident representative. So I wanted to know, with all, obviously family values and all, but you'd said that there's no UN staff member involved. Is paying the bail for an accused briber, does that constitute involved?
I don't know.
I'll
have to check. I'll have to.
Could you check on that?
Could
you get some?
I don't doubt the veracity of what you're telling me, but I will just have to check. Okay. Errol.
Thank you, Stephane. Two questions. Number one, there was a recent story, very good story by IPS that we actually republished, that one NGO at the UN is very much supportive or requesting forming of database on sexual abuse and paternity, if I'm right, I think so. And I would like to know what is the position of Secretary General of that. Is he supportive of that?
Well,
what
I
he
think
thinks?
we have done great strides in tracking down paternity issues involving peacekeepers, and obviously we very much keep data up to date on that. Your second question.
My second question, Pope Francis went to Myanmar. He delivered a strong statement. What is the view of the Secretary General of his visit? Not only because he's the Secretary General of UN, but because he's a Catholic from Europe, and how he views on that in the terms of visiting the Pope.
The fact that he's the Secretary General, maybe Antonio Guterres, may be a Catholic from Europe is a known fact, but I think it's separate from his role as Secretary General. We obviously very much welcome the Pope's visit to Myanmar and then on to Bangladesh. I think anything that can help in the process of helping the Rohingyas, helping the people of Myanmar, and helping alleviate the suffering is very much welcome. Yes, sir.
Yes, the ICC spokesperson was upstairs a few minutes ago, and he described enforced disappearance as a continuing crime. What is the position of the Secretary General with regards to nations that refuse to cooperate with the UN Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances to resolve those crimes, solve those crimes, bring the perpetrators of the crimes of enforced disappearance to justice? What's the position of the Secretary General?
The working group is an important human rights mechanism. One that is obviously separate from the Secretary General, but I think it's we believe that it's incumbent on all member states to cooperate with all the mechanisms of the human rights machinery here at the UN. Nizar.
Thank you, Stephane. Is there any progress with regard to delivery of aid in Yemen, or did I miss anything before I came?
No, I have not. I have not gotten an update. As far as I know, there have been no major updates that I've received today.
Do you mean that only one vessel managed to get to Hodeidah?
That's the latest information that I have.
And no contacts with the Saudi coalition about that?
Well, obviously, we continue to be in contact with all the relevant parties to try to help alleviate the situation. As whenever there are humanitarian updates, we share them with you. Evelyn.
Yes, could OSHA give you regular updates?
OSHA does. It's one of the things OSHA does very well, is giving me regular updates.
I know, but usually we're getting, UNICEF says this, WHO says this.
Well, we do our best to coordinate. As we know, coordination saves lives and time. Yes, sir.
Thank you. About the repatriation of the Rohingya Muslims that is about to take place. But there are many Rohingya who say that they don't want to go back because of reprisal by the government of Myanmar. What is the United Nations going to do about pacifying these people that they should return back to their own homeland?
Look, whether we're talking about Rohingya refugees in Myanmar or any refugees, no one should ever be forced to move or forced to return home. All returns have to be voluntary and have to be to their place, to the place where people came from, not in any other location. It's about the freedom of refugees and the rights of refugees. Nizar.
Yeah, given the
presently
gravity
they have a place in Bangladesh where they are temporarily declared this part of refuge in the enclave part of refuge for the Rohingyas. They can stay there until such time they have pacified enough to go back to their homeland?
Well, I think it's clear to everyone that Bangladesh, the government and the people of Bangladesh have been extremely generous in welcoming Rohingya refugees. I mean, the flow of people that we update you regularly on, the numbers are mind-boggling. But as we said, for any refugees anywhere, once security situation improves in their home country, people should be allowed for safe, dignified, and voluntary return to their place of origin. Nizar.
Given the gravity of the humanitarian situation in Yemen, 2.5 million are already cut off water and fuel and other supplies. And some reports say that it's too late probably for 2.5 million people to be rescued if the situation continues like that. Why the Secretary General doesn't pay a visit to Yemen? This is probably the biggest crisis in the world. Also to Myanmar, where there is ethnic cleansing.
I think the Secretary General has been extremely clear and extremely vocal about the desperate situation in Yemen. I think no one can accuse him of being silent. The same thing goes for the situation of the Rohingyas in Bangladesh. A Secretary General visit is important, obviously at any time, but we'd never want to get in the way of the delivery of aid. But the fact that he has not personally visited Bangladesh, I think in no way lessens his outrage to what has been going on in the area.
What's happening in Yemen could amount to genocide, given that they are depriving a whole nation of food and water and everything. Why don't they refer to why doesn't the reporter on genocide come up with any statement about this?
That's a question for the Special Rapporteur on Genocide. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you said the main message of the Secretary General during the African Union Summit is the need for development. There are quite several reports about the killing of peacekeepers in Africa, Mali, or Central Africa. Will he discuss the security situation with African leaders?
Yeah, I think he will have a number of bilateral meetings. Obviously, depending on his interlocutor, the security situation will come up. We continue to flag here the violence that our peacekeepers in Mali and in the Central African Republic, to just mention both, face on a daily basis. It's something that's very high on the Secretary General's mind. Yes, and then we'll go to you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just want to understand what you said earlier about refugees, and if I understood you correctly, you said that even if their home country is declared and verified to be safe, and the refugees have settled in another country, let's say Bangladesh, Myanmar is declared safe as an example, that is still their voluntary decision to go back, even if the country that they're now residing in can point to as being overburdened in caring for these people? I mean, if the whole purpose of the refugee statute is to treaty is to give protection, asylum to those being persecuted or in fear of being persecuted, once that threat is removed and verified to be removed, why is it then up to the refugees to decide, as opposed to the destination country, that they
I
can
think
stay?
what we never want to see is a situation where people are forced or pushed by force to return somewhere where they may not feel safe. We have seen in the past in Kenya, people, Somali refugees returning. We've seen cases of Somali. Is that people have rights, and we never would want to see anyone being pushed by force. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Stephane. In Bangladesh, forced disappearances is going on in Bangladesh, though Bangladesh Prime Minister claimed that forced disappearances in the USA and UK is much higher than Bangladesh, and US and UK they are involved in the forced disappearances. But the scenario is just yesterday, a co-church father of a co-church, Mr. William, he's disappeared. And last 2 months, an assistant professor of a private university who is working for the anti-radicalization, Dr. Mobashir Hassan, he's disappeared. And he's disappeared from the UNDP office, and media reported that he's under the intelligence agencies. He's under them. So what is your observation about the higher level of the disappearances in Bangladesh?
I don't have any of the details of the cases you mentioned. I think it's a matter of principle. Countries need to investigate all disappearances and to cooperate with the relevant human rights mechanisms. Yes, sir.
Yes, Stephane.
And then we'll go to Linda, sorry.
It's the Secretary General. Does the Secretary General consider enforced disappearances a continuing crime?
I wasn't there for the briefing. I'm not sure I understand what the definition of continuing crime. What we know is that there continues to be disappearances, forced disappearances all over the world. Linda, sorry.
Thank you, Steph.
Waiting.
I was just wondering what the SG's point of view is regarding the potential publishing of the list of companies or corporations doing business with Israeli settlements, and if there's been any movement in terms of it.
That's really an issue for the Human Rights Council. We don't have any comment at this point. Mr. Lee.
I'm going to stay logistic or bureaucratic. In his visit to Côte d'Ivoire, the president of Cameroon, Paul Biya, has announced that himself, his spouse, and a large team will be there as well. Can you give us some, do you know specifically whether he'll be meeting with him to follow up on the somewhat famous Golden Statue meeting, at least in Cameroon? And can we just get a list of who does he plan to meet with, and will each of them involve a readout of some kind? Even if
we will try to give you as many readouts as possible as the case is in most of these summits. Meetings kind of scheduled as they happen. Things are planned, but then we'd like to confirm them once they have. So we will keep you posted as they happen.
For example, Mr. Fall, Mr. Chambas, are they all there as well? In the sense
I'm not aware that they are there.
And could I ask something else?
You should. Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, actually, before, I've asked you at the end of these briefings, but I wanted to ask you about the, quote, mystery ASG. I did notice that the word unique was taken out. But it's still,
nobody seems to know how that
but it remains that this thing called the Risk Capacity Office is basically an AU office.
My understanding, it really has to do with WFP as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, and the final one has to do with financial disclosure. The under Ban Ki-moon, much to his credit, he instituted the public financial disclosure program. So I've tried to look at it. It doesn't look like there's much going on in terms of in the last year under Antonio Guterres. He himself filed. But for example, the Deputy Secretary General, there's no filing at all, and there have been filings by others since she was, sworn into office. So I'm wondering, is that program still active?
Completely.
Are all the filings going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of any change in the policy or in the plan.
Because the most recent date is from 2015.
I understand.
Yes. Yes, Stephane, on this suppression, Israeli and United States move to suppress this blacklisting of Israeli companies and the companies sending in their goods into into Israel and are able to sell. And Nikki Haley, the ambassador of the United States, says that it is Israel bashing. What is the position on this blacklisting of the companies, which is now about to take place or to be released?
I would, my dear Masood, I would refer you to the answer I gave to your colleague Linda about 2.5 minutes ago, which is it's a matter that it was a decision of the Human Rights Council, and at this point we have no comment on it. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stephane. As you know, the Secretary General met yesterday with the high-level advisory group. Were there any conclusions reached?
I think it was a very it was a very informative discussion that the Secretary General had with his advisory group, and I think he plans it's a big part of his mediation prevention efforts, and he plans to call on them as needed, and called on them to approach him with ideas or suggestions as well. It's very much a two-way street.
What is their main goal at this stage?
This goal is at this point, they are available to the Secretary General as a resource. Mr. Klein.
In the interest of transparency.
All right, let's go.
It'll be an easy question, I assure you. In the interest of transparency, will there be some sort of formal public disclosure of with measures of the performance of the various bureaus, departments, offices, agencies under the Secretary General? I mean, it's very hard to, discern in some coherent manner whether these agencies and bureaus and offices are measuring up to the standards that he's trying to set in his reform program. So is there a plan to make a more coherent disclosure of performance metrics and how they're stacking up?
Two things. There's the reform process. The Secretary General will be reporting to ECOSOC and on the development reform shortly, and then to the General Assembly on the management reforms and other reforms. His idea is to build a UN that is more efficient. I'm not sure I really understand what you mean. I mean, the Secretary General expects, obviously, all his departments to perform at the highest possible standard, and he will keep senior managers accountable.
Is there a plan to kind of quantify this to the extent possible, with stated objectives and measurements?
I mean, this is part of the ongoing dialogue that we have with the member states on an annual basis. I'll leave you in Brendan's hands. Thank you.